Do you take the time to look at a single snowflake? Of all, just looking at the little intricate geometry to it and everything? No? Maybe? When you clean, do you make sure you dust along the trim on top of the door of each room? Or do you take the time to take a look at each of those little dust particles? No? What sort of care do you give to your car? When you paint it, when it's painted, or when you're detailing it, when it's, or if you don't have a car, what sort of care do you take with the paint job on your bicycle or on your skateboard? You take your time and make sure it looks nice, right? You pick a nice color, and you make sure, or on the car, you make sure that the pinstriping is in good shape and everything. Or perhaps anyone build model airplanes or anything? No? Ever? If you do, have you ever stressed over making sure that you use the right color on the engine's oil cap inside the little fuselage of the little model airplane? I have. Do you ever use a Q-tip and a toothpick to clean a shower head? Okay, one, all right. Things can get so tiny, and yet they can take up a lot of time, and they can take on a lot of significance. We can, if we choose, to give all these little things such attention, such great attention. And yet these things aren't just small, they're minuscule. These are tiny things. I mean, especially if fly up in an airplane and look down on the earth from an airplane. It's a big place, and then think about that one little drop of dew, or that shower head, or whatever. They can look so insignificant at that point, so insignificant compared to the bigger picture. Or look at photographs of Earth from space, like the famous blue marble photograph. Look at how small the Earth is in comparison with just the vast blackness of space. Or take a photograph of a galaxy, one of those photographs of a galaxy, and imagine that only one of those little dots of light is our sun, around which are all the planets, revolving and everything. But then remember that our galaxy is just one of about 100 billion galaxies at the latest estimation. And then think, how small is that little drop of dew? Or that bicycle, or that shower head, or dust mite. Yet we can still give them a lot of attention, if we so choose. Just because something is small doesn't mean it's insignificant. Just because something's small doesn't mean it doesn't matter. In the first reading, we hear that God loves all things that are and hates, and doesn't hate anything that he's made. If you hated it, you wouldn't have made it, the poet says, in that reading directed to God. I learned two things from this. Each snowflake, each drop of dew, each fish in the sea, each dust particle matters to God. If he didn't want to make them, he wouldn't have made them. Second, he's got no regrets about anything he's made. I can ruin dinner. I can ruin a meal. I can regret all the time that I put into it. I can regret all the energy I put into it. I can regret the waste of the ingredients I put into, burning a meal. But God has no regrets. He just makes it the way he wants it the first time and doesn't regret any of it. He doesn't hate anything that he's made. So, when Jesus cares enough to visit a little town in a little country, on a little planet, in a little solar system, in a little galaxy, what does he find? What does he find in a tree? He finds a little guy in a little tree trying to see over the crowd, Zacchaeus. And being a tax collector, he probably had little respect and little attention from his neighbors. They probably considered him a waste of a little life because he's because he scams and steals from his neighbors for his own good and for the sake of the enemy, the government, being a tax collector. But Jesus gives Zacchaeus not a little attention, he gives him a lot of attention. He wants to spend time with him. He wants to have dinner at his place. And that's kind of the MO with Jesus. Jesus constantly gives a lot of time to the littlest people. He picks fishermen like Peter and Andrew to join him. He continually hangs out with lepers or prostitutes and so on. All people who would rarely be considered by society to be of any great value. But this is a pattern even with God into the Old Testament. God picks the Israelites, this Hebrew tribe. He picks this little tribe out of slavery in Egypt, frees them from that, and gives them their own place. And then God picks David, the youngest and the smallest and the weakest of all of his brothers, and he becomes a great general, even though he's so little he can't wear the armor. It's too heavy for him. He can't wear the armor because it's so heavy. But he becomes a great general and becomes the greatest king of Israel. And in fact, all those who God gives his attention to, though they may be small, become great. Zacchaeus didn't have much going for him. But after meeting Jesus, he becomes great. He becomes great in his generosity. He becomes great in justice. He says, half my possessions I give to the poor. He says, if I've extorted anything from anyone, I'll repay it 4 times over. He goes from being little to being great, even if he didn't get any taller. The little ones are the people that God gives his attention to, as we hear in the Beatitudes. And so they are the ones who become the most greatly transformed. And so it is to their houses, as Jesus says at the end of this reading, it is to their houses that salvation comes.